Hello and welcome to the first official episode of the Top Left Quarter podcast. I will be your only host, Finn Lyons. This is my third time actually attempting this podcast. Once last year with a good friend of mine who hopefully will be making a guest appearance sometime during the hockey season. And one time in 8th grade I attempted to do this podcast. So here I am, and I want to sort of get started here by introducing myself and just sort of what I like here in hockey and just sort of my hockey personality before I get into some season predictions. As this season, well, the preseason at least starts on Saturday, so we want to kick off with season predictions before the real thing gets going. So, like I said, I'm your host, Finn Lyons. I am a fan of the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks, so I will probably be focusing a lot on their seasons and just sort of how they're doing. But I will, of course, check around the NHL and sort of give my take on all the 32 teams in the league. And this is supposed to be an exciting season. New team in the league, Utah, coming in for Arizona after the complete mess that happened in that franchise's history. But anyways, like I said, Buffalo Sabres fan, born and raised in Buffalo. So obviously have the Sabres indebted in my veins. So I've been following them my whole entire life. The highs and mostly lows, 13 years not making the playoffs. Will they make it this year? We'll see. We'll get into that with my season predictions. So, like I said, I've been following the Sabres my whole life, and I became a Canucks fan through the Sabres. Back in the 2010s, Ryan Miller was my favorite player growing up. I always wanted to be a goalie, wanted to be like him, and I was just sort of a super fan, I guess. I have almost all his jerseys. I have a bunch of things, signed by him, pictures with him, and sort of stuff like that. And he just kind of grew my hockey fandom, and it's kind of how I got to where I am. And speaking of getting to where I am, when the Sabres traded him in 2014 to the St. Louis Blues, I followed him there, watched the Blues little playoff run they had with him. Unfortunately, didn't go how I'd hoped, but, getting to see him there. And then when he left in free agency for Vancouver is how I became a Vancouver Canucks fan. There's just something about the Canucks besides Miller that sort of encapsulated me. I mean, this was the end of the Sedin's sort of run in the NHL, and, seeing Alex Burrows and Alex Edler, Chris Tanev. I don't know. There's just something that I really loved about them. I love their colors. I love their logo. I wish I would go back to their black skate full time, but jersey conversation is for another day. But yeah, their team was just so fun, and I got to see them again make the playoffs with Ryan Miller, his first season there, and then he still played great despite being on awful teams surrounded him the last few years of his tenure in Vancouver. But just watching some of the young stars that are now dominating the NHL, Brock Besser and Elias Pettersson specifically, sort of watching them grow around as I started getting more and more into hockey, and just sort of made me fall in love with the team and just everything about them. And they've had so many fun players that I just love following and watching. And now as they're a actual contender, it's really fun to have a team that I like make the playoffs consistently and, be good year in and year out, and no one having to wonder if they're going to break a 13-year playoff drought. But yeah, and then Ryan Miller at the end of his career went to Anaheim. Followed them while he was there. Didn't really care for them after. I don't know. There's just nothing that really captured me about the Ducks like Miller. I mean, the Ducks will always have a special place in my heart. But I don't know. The Ducks, for me, fandom-wise, aren't that important. I don't know. They had a really nice brand, but obviously when I was paying attention to them more closely, they had those god-awful jerseys, and they were sort of on the down spiral of their time in the limelight, and I don't know. There's just nothing about the Ducks that I like, nothing about them I dislike. So, yeah, that's sort of my hockey fandom there, and how I sort of became fans of each team I follow. Even though I am born in Buffalo, the Canucks are my number one team. It's just sort of hard 13 years not watching your team make the playoffs, and the only times they made the playoffs, I wasn't really into hockey. Last time 2011, I was watching back then, but I wasn't too into it as I am today. Like I said, I didn't really get too into it until 2014-15-ish when Ryan Miller went to the Canucks. So yeah, I've been sort of growing my hockey fandom ever since then, and been to a lot of games. Love going to games. I'll watch every game on TV. I'll watch the whole thing usually. Usually I'll try to keep my whole attention on it. Sometimes throw it on in the background, but I'll never miss a game, even if the Sabres are last place, like they were in 2020 or 2021 during the COVID shortened season. Yeah, that was rough. But I'm excited for this season. I think both of my teams are poised to do good. And like I said, we'll get into that season predictions in a minute. Also, with my hockey sort of life and fandom there, I became a goalie because of Ryan Miller. I'll probably mention Ryan Miller 100 times during this first episode, but I sort of became a goalie because of him. Played since 7th grade, even played up until now into college. Did have to give it up, a bit too many concussions. So it wasn't worth it anymore. But it was sort of a journey that, ingrained me more into hockey. And I feel like playing the game gives me sort of a unique perspective that not everyone has. And even, especially playing it at a higher level than a lot of people, gives me an even better perspective to sort of talk about these things and sort of give my analysis on, different moments and different players and their productions and their sort of skill sets. Obviously, I'm not claiming to be an expert by any means, but I feel like I have a special sort of insight that a lot of casual fans sort of don't. So, speaking of insight, let's get into my season predictions here. Starting in the Atlantic, Buffalo in the Atlantic. We'll see where they finish. We're gonna start off from the bottom. Start from the bottom. Montreal, going 36, 39, and 7 with 79 points. I don't think most people will disagree with that. That they'll finish at the bottom. Probably somewhere from a 75 to sort of an 82-ish point team. They're still in their rebuild stage. They had a pretty fun season last year. I think they're going to have a fun competitive season this year. Obviously not competitive for the playoffs, but they'll be a team that you don't want to face day in and day out. They brought in some good talent. They developed their talent well. I am a generational hater on certain players, and one of those players happens to be Juraj Slafkovsky. I don't think he's good. And I think that really weakens their top six. Suzuki and Caulfield, obviously great. Caulfield still has not hit 30 goals, best 30 goal scorer to never score 30, as we all know. But I think he takes another step this season, and Suzuki has already become a great two-way forward. He has great defensive prowess. He has great offensive prowess, and I think he can really drive that line. And even though I don't think Slafkovsky is going to be anything special or anything good necessarily, I think he can sort of help him develop into a sort of complementary role. Slafkovsky is sort of a bigger hitter, bigger body kind of guy. So I think he can sort of fit well protecting, Caulfield and Suzuki, Caulfield especially, who's not that big. And being able to get Caulfield into these more dangerous spots will be sort of where I think Slafkovsky will end up rather than a point scorer and, being like a number one pick should be. But yeah, the Canadiens also brought in Laine this season. I think Laine has the potential to be an impactful player for the Canadiens. I just don't know if he'll have the motivation. It sort of seems like that's how it's been his whole career from Winnipeg and Columbus up to this point. The rest of the Canadiens forwards, I don't know. There's nothing inspiring. Like I said, their top six is fine. If Doc can stay healthy, I think he can, sort of take that next step into becoming a true top six center. Newhook, again, is fine. He doesn't really provide any specific value to the top six. I think he's more suited for a sort of bottom six role. But speaking of their bottom six, I think it might be abysmal. Christian Dvorak, Josh Anderson, Yoel Armia, Brendan Gallagher, these are all terrible players that are just sort of there. They're just sort of to help them reach this cap floor. And, Gallagher is sort of an unmovable contract along with Dvorak. So they're not providing really any value to this team. And again, speaking of no value, their defense is terrible. Mike Matheson on your first pair. I don't care how many points he put up last year. He is one of the worst defensemen I've ever seen. He's dirty, and all he does is look to hit and injure people. And I think he is sort of a disgrace, honestly. And the rest of their defense, besides David Savard, is young and promising. Besides from Jack Eye, I think Jack Eye genuinely shouldn't even be in the AHL. He's terrible. He can't play defense. All he does is go out there and fight, and that's apparently funny to people. He doesn't provide any value to the team besides having a funny name and hitting people. And the goalies, Montembeault and Primo, or Caden Primeau, they're fine. They're whatever. I think Montembeault is sort of a stopgap, best suited for a backup role. I like him though. He's good. He's fun. He'll win you some games here and there, and that's about that for the Canadiens. Moving on to Ottawa, 40, 36, and 6 for 86 points. I think the Senators are super overrated. And you might say, who? By Senators fans. By being a Sabres fan, I see a lot of Senators tweets all the time. And I just don't think they're good at all. Their top six is above average, don't get me wrong. But having Perron in your top six and Drake Batherson and old Claude Giroux, I don't know. I just don't trust them as much as maybe other people do. It doesn't inspire me to, sort of match the high-flying offenses of the Atlantic or just the Eastern Conference in general. And then their bottom six is just absolutely abysmal. Just Shane Pinto, Michael Amadio, Riley Greig, Noah Gregor. Like, these players are just either not NHL ready or just bad. They're sort of replacement-level players, and they're not going to really provide that bottom six sort of depth you need to sort of take the next step into being a playoff contender. Along with their defense is fine. I honestly think their defense is pretty good. Sanderson is overrated. Don't come at me, Sens fans, but he's just not a top 10 defenseman. He's not even a top 15. Excuse me. But he's good. He's not as good as some other younger defensemen in this conference that we'll get to. But him and Zub is terrible. Best suited for a third pair role. 6th, 7th defenseman. He can come in when he needs. Provides that physicality. I think Shabbat is still really good, and he's going to provide that sort of mentorship to Sanderson to continue building his career path along with getting Nick Jensen in the Jacob Chychrun trade. I think Nick Jensen is solid. I think he's going to provide more than Chychrun did for the Ottawas, not because he's better, but because I think he fits more into the Senators system. And then moving on to their goalies, Allmark and Forsberg. Allmark's interesting to me. He thrives on any team. I mean, obviously watching him in Buffalo, I think being on a bad team, he can still thrive and put up good numbers. I just don't know how much his good goaltending can make up for the lack of offense that I see on this team. Moving on to another team that is super overrated and will not make the next step like most people think, out of the Senators, Sabres, and this team, the Red Wings. I don't think the Red Wings are going to take the next step like most people think. I have them finishing with 92 points, a 43, 33, and 6 record. The addition of Tarasenko is interesting to me. Bringing back Patrick Kane is an interesting move. Besides that, I don't know. They just don't have a flair to me like they do. I think last year they were sort of an unexpected team. so people didn't really know what to think of them when going up against them, which I think sort of provided to their success. And if Larkin goes down, I mean, you've seen their record is terrible without him, and their center court I think is just awful. JT Compher is not a second line center in any sense of the word, and he's also overpaid for what he does. I do really like their bottom six, but as you could have one of the better bottom sixes and still not be able to take that next step, especially with the defense they have. Ben Sherratt on the first pair projected is pretty bad, along with Jeff Petrie and Oli Mata. I just think it's an awful decision to sort of go with this sort of defense along with their goaltending, which I think might be bottom 5 in the league, depending on who they go with out of training camp in the preseason that's coming up. Talbot and Lyon currently are projected to be their starters. I think that is bad. I don't know how much longer Alex Lyon can sort of go on this sort of later career revitalization, and Cam Talbot I think is on his way out. He's sort of on the decline. So I don't see them sort of taking that next step. A team that I think is going to take a step backwards this year is Tampa Bay. 47-31-4 for 98 points. I do think they make the playoffs. Just barely, because I think the Metro is a really bad division, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Tampa Bay, they obviously added Jake Gensel. But other than that, I don't know. I think their team sort of takes a step back. I mean, Cam Atkinson in your top six, washed up Cam Atkinson, who wasn't even like that good of a player to begin with, along with I don't think Brendan Hagel's that good. He puts up points. He's sort of a merchant of, well, Stamkos isn't there anymore, but I think he's sort of a merchant of just sort of the Tampa Bay system. Obviously, though, that first line is insanely good, and you don't have to worry about even their center core, I think, is really good too. But other than that, their wingers are pretty, average. I really like the addition of Gergensons for the bottom six. Luke Glendening, along with Mikey Easimont, I think are going to have, a solid contribution to this team. But I just don't think this team is going to, they took a step back last year. I mean, Vasilevsky wasn't himself. I know he came coming off an injury, but I think he's starting to sort of plateau out. I don't think he'll ever be even a below average goaltender or even a slightly above average. I think he's just starting to plateau, and teams are sort of trying to figure him out. And with this defense in front of him, besides Victor Hedman and Eric Chernak, I think this defense is awful. Darren Radish, Ryan McDonough, and Nick Perbix. I mean, Nick Perbix is young. I think he has the potential to be something solid here for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but Ryan McDonough, man. He was fine. He was good last year in Nashville, but he's old. He's injury prone. I mean, what can you really say about him? What can I really say about this next team other than who knows? Buffalo, I have finishing above Tampa Bay, and also in the playoffs, breaking their 13-year drought, going 46, 29, and 7 for 99 points. Now, I don't know if I actually believe that the Sabres are going to be able to make the playoffs, but I think I'm going to try to let my drought frustrations sort of get away from me here. I mean, I would have liked them to add another top six winger. I think besides missing one top six winger, I think this top six is elite. I expect J.J. Peterka and Jack Quinn to take the next step. Peterka put up 28 goals last year. Quinn was hurt, so hopefully a full season from Quinn gets them in that 25 to 30 goal range too. I think Tage Thompson being healthy is going to help the Sabres a lot. Cousins is going to get back to his form. And then I really like their bottom six additions, Jason Zucker, Obey Kubel, Sam Lafferty, those sort of players. I think I'm not big on, physicality and grit. I'm not one of those people who think, oh, that's what you need and we need to get back to that physical game. No, but you do need it. It's something you can't ignore, obviously, and this is something the Sabres have lacked over the last 13 years. Something the Sabres have also lacked over the last 13 years, and something I still think they're lacking is defense. Obviously, Dahlin is a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. Hopefully, Power can get out of his little slump he had last year. I think he will. Along with Byram, I think he has the potential to sort of make the next step and sort of become a top 30 defenseman, and provide some of that defensive prowess to the back end for the Sabres. But I think everyone else on the defense is sort of just a question mark. I mean, Yoki Haru is fine, but what does he really bring that you couldn't have found something better in free agency? Samuelson's tied up long term. He's injury prone. He sort of had that one good season, and then he got that big contract and sort of has lost a step, I think. And Connor Clifton is just abysmal. Watching him last year, he doesn't bring the physicality that he was supposed to. He doesn't bring the offense he was supposed to. He doesn't bring anything. And I think where the Sabres sort of go right is their goalies. I think Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to continue to cement himself as a top 10 goalie in the NHL this year, along with Devin Levi. He had an okay sort of end to his campaign last year, after playing in Rochester for a little bit. I think he's going to continue to take the next step and hopefully continue developing. A team that I think has worse goalies than the Sabres, though, is the team I have above them, is the Toronto Maple Leafs, going 47-29-6 for 100 points. I just think Toronto is just by default like a good team. I mean, as long as they have Matthew Marner and Nylander, I think they're going to have a high-flying offense. I am worried about Knies and Bobby McMahon in their top six. I don't think that's a good idea. I do like Knies. I think he has the potential to sort of be a good offensive contributor, but I'm just not so sure about Bobby McMahon. Their bottom six is really good with the exclusion of Ryan Reeves, who literally does nothing but fight, and I very much do not think he is NHL worthy. Their defense is interesting. They brought in OEL and Tanev, two older guys who sort of had late career revitalizations last year. I don't know. I think Tanev will be fine, and I think he's going to provide what the Maple Leafs are looking for. But I think OEL is sort of going to fall off from his form last year in Florida. Speaking of Florida, their goaltender, backup, presumably, will be Anthony Stolarz. I think he's a great backup, but I think they're going to rely on him more than Florida or Anaheim ever did. And I think that might show a bit of weakness in his game. For their starter Wall, I'm just not sure if he's ready. I do think he's going to be a great goaltender one day, but again, he's young, and I just don't know if he's ready for that starting role, especially on a team with high expectations like this. Speaking of high expectations, Boston brought in a boatload of free agents, mostly former Canucks. And I think the free agents they brought in, especially Lindholm, is going to make this team continue to be a contender. This is assuming Swayman does come back and re-sign. But the addition of Lindholm specifically has shored up their center core, which was a question mark last year and was surprisingly good. Their bottom six does worry me a little bit, but I think last year they sort of showed that they're developing that bottom six, and these players that are younger are going to be a mainstay later on. Again, their defense is still really good, especially with the addition of Nikita Zadorov. He definitely fits in the Boston Bruins sort of super physical type of play. He's a big defenseman who can provide that physical presence. And like I said, as long as Swayman comes back, I think Korpisalo won't be a problem as a backup, and I think behind a better team, he'll be able to get those stats back to where they were when we thought he could be a very good goaltender in the NHL. And at the top of the Atlantic, I have Florida with our first 51 team at 26-6 for 106 points, 1 point above the Boston Bruins. Yeah, I don't think the Panthers took a step back at all. I think they stayed probably about the same. Their forward core obviously didn't really change. Their defense changed a little bit, but I think adding Nate Schmidt and Adam Boqvist, I think it's going to have sort of the same effect as adding OEL last year. I think they're going to take these, Nate Schmidt specifically are going to take this older guy and sort of get him back into a role where he can positively contribute to the team. And Adam Boqvist, I think getting an opportunity on a team that can actually, develop players and have a good structure It will be good for them. And, of course, Bobrovsky is still Bobrovsky. He is elite. Moving on now to the Metro. Starting from the bottom once again, I think is Philadelphia. I think the Flyers are awful. I don't see any hype around the Flyers, and I don't understand why anyone thinks that they're going to be that good a team. I understand Michkov looks amazing, and I think he's going to be amazing, but he's going to have to adjust to the NHL style, coming over from the KHL. So we'll sort of see how that goes. But yeah, Sean Couturier and Owen Tippett are really and Travis Konechny are really the only people on this team that I trust on offense. I don't think Tyson Forrester is that good. I don't think Morgan Frost is a second-line center. And that bottom six is sort of the Philly way, the Broad Street bully sort of thing. But I don't think that's sort of viable in today's NHL. And again, their defense is abysmal outside of Cam York, Draisaitl, and I'll say Sanheim too. I think it's awful. Nick Seeler is a seventh defenseman at best. Ristolainen is absolutely terrible, and I cannot believe the Sabres got a first-round pick from the Flyers for him. And Igor Zamula, I don't know too much about him, so I can't really judge him there. And then the goalies, Samuel Erisson's fine. I think he'd be a fine backup. And then Ivan Fedotov, how you pronounce his name, watching him last year in his limited NHL stint, I think he was terrible, and I don't understand why people think he's going to be good. I don't see him making another step. He's big, and he plays really big, and he doesn't use his weight to his advantage. So I think the Flyers are last with 76 points. Now, a team that's sort of hard to talk about is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Obviously, the terrible passing of Johnny Gaudreau will loom over this team and sort of how we talk about them for this whole season. But I think even without Johnny Gaudreau in the lineup, I think they're going to surprise some people, especially with that sort of extra motivation to sort of play for Johnny. And not saying that they're going to make the playoffs. I have them finishing with 84 points, second last in the Metro. But I think they're going to take a step up. I mean, that Sean Monahan addition, I think, is going to be a great addition for them. I think Johnson and Fantilli take the next step, and I really like Chinakhov and Marchenko. I think they're going to become sort of mainstay top six players. The bottom six, of course, could use some work, but again, Columbus isn't really in a position to start making the playoffs, so they're just sort of developing these sort of guys. And I do like the addition of James Van Riemsdyk to sort of be a mentor role for these players. Their defense, again, is sort of fine. I mean, Severson and Provorov don't really bring defense. I mean, Provorov doesn't really bring anything to a team. If they can properly use Jurček, I think that will be a great move for them. And then Goodbranson is Goodbranson. I mean, we all know he's absolutely terrible, and he's only there because he's making $4 million on his contract. Moving to the goalies, I think Merzlikins is going to get back to where he was as sort of this borderline above average goalie, and I think he still has it in him. He's sort of removed from the Merzlikins incident, which also haunts this team still. And then Daniel Tarasov, I think, is young. He's young, and I think he has the chance to take a nice new step this season. Excuse me. Moving on to the team of which city I am in, the Pittsburgh Penguins, I think are going to play out exactly like last year. Sort of being a little mixed, but ultimately decide to sell. After signing Sidney Crosby again, they're going to pretend that they're a playoff contender and that they have chance to make sort of a run, but ultimately this team is not good. I do really like the addition of Beauvillier on the offense, and of course Rutger McGroarty. I think if you pair him up with maybe Sid or Malkin, I think he has a chance of becoming one day a true superstar in this league. But other than that, this team is just sort of filled up with people on their last leg and sort of trying to prove themselves that they can still play. I mean, Lars Eller, Kevin Hayes, like I said, even though I like the addition, Crosby and Malkin are old. They're not trying to prove anything, don't get me wrong. But Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, Ryan Graves, Marcus Pettersson, And, of course, Carlson on the back end. I mean, Carlson is still elite, but he can't really mask the holes on defense. And I think their goalies are good. I think that is going to be a really big thing that carries them, keeps them within relevance this season. I mean, Jari I don't really trust. He's sort of hot and cold, and so is Nedeljkovic. But I think they're consistent enough to sort of provide the delusion that the Penguins need to pretend that they're still a good contending team. With 87 points, how I have them finishing. With 96 points, I think this is the first year that the Islanders finally don't back-end their way into a playoff spot. This team is not good. They haven't been good since their Eastern Conference final appearance 2 years ago now. I mean, this top six is abysmal. I mean, the first line is really good. Horvat, Duclair, and Barzal, I think, are going to be a great line together. But everyone else on this team, period, I think is just sort of a role player at this point in their career, and they're not going to live up to the expectations they have for them. Their defense is still solid. I think it's going to always be. I do like the addition of Mike Riley in the back end, although he is suited for more of a lesser role, but he is playing on the third pair. Obviously, they have probably the best goaltending talent in Sorokin and Varlamov, so I don't think anything is going to stop them there, but what I do think is going to stop them is their goal-scoring ability. Speaking of no goal-scoring ability, Washington Capitals also with 96 points, missing the playoffs this year. I was really high on the Capitals at the beginning of the offseason, but the more I look at teams around them, the more I look at their team themselves. I mean, they just lost TJ Oshie today, so that's a blow to them. Again, they added Pierre-Luc Dubois, who I think is genuinely awful. I think he doesn't care, and if he doesn't get his way, he stops trying. Mangiapane, though, is a very good addition, and I think he's going to be able to add goal scoring, even though I just said they don't have any, but be able to add some goal scoring that they are lacking. But other than that, this team is just, again, sort of old and decrepit. I mean, Ovechkin is just here to break Gretzky's goal record. Dylan Strome is a very good piece. Tom Wilson is bad. He punches people and sometimes scores. So that's for the offense. On the defense, I think they have a really good defense. I think probably this is a top 10 defense in the NHL. So maybe this can help keep up with their lack of goal scoring, especially with their new addition, Logan Thompson, in that. I don't really like Charlie Lindgren. I don't think he's going to continue to be as good as he was last year, but I think Logan Thompson will be able to eat up some of those starts and sort of provide a solid back end for them. So I think if they can sort of get past, if they can win like 2-1 games or 3-1 games, something like that, if they can sort of get themselves in a position there, I think they will be able to sort of maybe sneak back into the playoffs as they did last year. Speaking of getting into the playoffs for the Metro Division, I have the Rangers finishing third with 98 points. I while I was doing my predictions, I was like, well, obviously the Rangers have to be like probably first or second in the division, but no, I look at this team and I think it's just awful. Well, not awful, but comparatively speaking to the other two teams I have above them. Again, I do not like Lafreniere. I think he's bad, and I don't think he's going to continue to take this next step as people think he is going to. I think he's another bust of a first overall pick. And along with that, the rest of the top six isn't that good. I mean, Kreider, Zibanejad are sort of slowing down at their age. Panarin is still a superstar, but again, slowing down. Trocheck is fine. I think he's suited for a second line center role, but he can play the first line for that. And then Riley Smith, I don't think, again, he's slowing down. I don't think he's that good anymore. And then the bottom six is just kind of awful. I mean, Hedl, hopefully he can play a full season this year. I think he is still good. He's a very good contributor in the bottom six. But other than that, especially, again, Matt Rempe, probably my least favorite player in the history of the NHL. They need to do something about him and get a player who actually plays hockey and not pretends he's in a boxing ring on the ice. Their defense, again, is fine. They do have Adam Fox, and I think Ryan Lindgren is also taking a step along with Keandre Miller. I love Keandre Miller. I think he is going to continue to sort of cement himself as a top four defenseman. But of course, they have Jacob Trouba and Braden Schneider on the back end, and Zach Jones, who are sort of anchors in that sense. And then the goalies, obviously, Shesterkin, probably a top 3 goalie in the league, and quick, fine backup. There's nothing to complain about there. Moving above them, Carolina with 102 points. I think they're what people think the Rangers are going to be. Yeah, that's about all I can say about them. I mean, they have a solid forward core, and I think this forward core is going to produce. Really, sort of besides their center depth, which is sort of a problem. I mean, Kotkaniemi, Jack Drury, and Stahl. I do like Jack Drury, but of course Stahl and Kotkaniemi are bad, especially Stahl at this point in his career. But their wingers, I think, are amazing, and they'll sort of be able to provide that scoring touch. And of course, they always have a solid defense, so there's nothing to really talk about there. And then on the goaltending end, Anderson and Kochetkov, I think are both good enough to be starters in this league. Of course, Anderson's getting a little old, but I have complete faith in him to sort of carry this team into second place. And then the Eastern Conference, at least point-wise, champions, the New Jersey Devils. And I'm not concerned about them at all. I think the addition of Markstrom really is what's going to set them over the edge. I like Allen as the backup. And I think Jack Hughes continues to prove that he is worth it every penny. Nico Hischier is going to continue to step up as well. So that is that. So for the East playoffs, we have New Jersey as the 1 seed, Tampa as the wild card 2, Carolina as the Metro 2, New York as the Metro 3, Florida as the Atlantic 1, Buffalo as the wild card 1, and Boston and Toronto as the Atlantic 2 and 3. Moving to the West now, we'll start with the Central. At the bottom is Chicago. Obviously, I don't think I need to really justify it. I think they're going to finish with around 78 points. I think they added a lot of really good pieces this year. They just named Foligno the captain. I think that is going to be great for Bedard's development. But other than sort of adding some nice pieces on offense, their defense is still sort of in shambles, and that goaltending room is rough, especially with Bourgeois set to miss at least part of this season. Moving up to Minnesota now at 89 points, have them missing the playoffs. It's just sort of Fleury's last ride. I think Minnesota is in a transition period as they sort of move away from the Sutter and Parise era of their time. And sort of develop. They actually have prospects now to be able to develop, so this will sort of be a year to sort of see how they do with some time in the NHL. Moving to the newest team, Utah, finishing with 92 points. I really believed in them, like I did with Washington at the beginning of the offseason, acquiring Sergachev, like that, going to a new place in Utah and sort of having a stable ownership for the first time ever. But besides that, I mean, their team is not good. Having Barrett Hayden in your top 6 is a decision. Outside of Clayton Keller, really, I don't see like that great of an offense. I do expect Dylan Guenther to make a great step again, and Logan Cooley to continue to develop as well. But besides that, there's nothing really to write home about this team. Besides, their defense is good. I will give them that, but I don't know how consistent Ingram and Vejmelka can be in net for them. Speaking of in net, this team is completely based off their goaltending. Winnipeg with 95 points, missing the playoffs. I think what sort of was expected of Winnipeg last year is going to happen this year. They have a lot of, again, offseason sort of questions about them, and I just don't think that they're going to be able to continue to play. I mean, they're not inspiring. Their bottom 6 is kind of bad, and then their defense took a step back again this season, and it's just, again, it's going to come down to how much can Connor Hellebuyck play and carry this team. Can he carry them kicking and screaming into the playoffs? A team that I have surprisingly high is the St. Louis Blues at 96 points. I think this team is my dark horse team to make the playoffs. I don't see anyone talking about them. I see a lot of people writing them off. But I think this team is going to be good. I really like the addition to Holloway and Broberg. I think going to St. Louis and having this opportunity to actually get minutes is going to really help them, and it's going to show just sort of not why Edmonton wasn't a good spot for them, just because they didn't have enough room for them. And I think this offense is really good. Kyrou Thomas and Buchnevich, I think, are going to sort of lead this offense. And their defense, outside of Nick Leddy, I think is really spectacular. And I think it's going to surprise some people. And, of course, Binnington and Hofer are fine. They're a fine tandem. We'll just have to hope that Binnington can sort of play at an acceptable level this season. Moving on, Colorado at 99 points. I'm not high on Colorado in the regular season, at least. I think getting into the playoffs, they'll be good, and they're sort of a well-oiled team like that. So we'll sort of see how they go from there. But yeah, I like their offense, just not enough. I think if when Nichushkin comes back, if Lehkonen comes back, if Landeskog comes back, I think this team will be a lot better. Their bottom six, again, worries me along with their top six. I don't like Druid on the first line. I know he had a pretty good season last year. I also don't like Wood in your top six. So we'll sort of see how that plays out. Their defense, again, is spectacular. But we'll have to sort of see if Justice Anunin can sort of take on a backup role, allowing Georgiev to play less games. He did lead the league in wins, but his stats were a bit shaky. Nashville at 100 points for second in the Central. This is a team I don't think is actually that good, but I think there's just going to be sort of an energy around them that sort of propels them to be a really good regular season team. I mean, adding Stamkos and Marchessault and Shea are sort of their big calling card this season. I mean, Stamkos is fine. I don't know how well he'll do outside of the Tampa Bay system. Marchessault, I think, is great. I think he'll be a great offensive contributor there. But I don't know about the rest of their team. I don't really like Tommy Novak as your second-line center. And then that bottom six is good. I do really like that. But their defense, besides Yossi, I think is kind of abysmal. I don't think Brady Shea is good. I don't think he's going to add any offense that they're expecting him to. I don't think he's going to add the defense that they're expecting him to. And then Carrier, I like Carrier, but I don't think he's, that big of a player. I think he'll be able to add solid defense, but anyone else, the rest of the defense around him and Yossi are not going to be able to make up for his sort of lack of high-end skill. And then in that, I don't like Saros. I think he's overrated. Don't get me wrong, he's a good goalie, and I think he'll be able to keep this team sort of on that 100-point pace, like I said, and then getting Scott Wedgwood as their backup. I like Wedgwood. He's a fine backup. Speaking of Wedgwood's old team, Dallas, 110 points for first in the Central. I think this team is just poised to be really, really good. Their defense did get a little shaky. I don't like that, but I think Ottinger and DeSmith will be able to hold that on the back end, especially Ottinger. I don't get this whole hate campaign going on around Ottinger. I still think he's a top 10 goalie, and I still think he has room to grow. But like I said, their offense is stellar still. Wyatt Johnson is going to keep taking that next step. Logan Stankoven showed that he's going to be a great player last year, and Jason Robinson still is elite, and I think he is going to take another step towards greatness next season. Like I said, the defense is a little shaky. I think Miro Heiskanen is really overrated. He is not a top 15 defenseman. But Esa Lindell and Thomas Harley are very good and can make up for what I see in Heiskanen's game. But Lyubushkin and Dumba are terrible, especially with the contracts that they were given. I think Dumba will be able to sort of adjust to this Dallas system, but I think Lyubushkin just hits things and doesn't really care about defense, and I don't think he's going to fit well for their system. Moving on to the final division, the Pacific. San Jose, obviously, is last, and I have them finishing last in the entire league. This team did get better. over the offseason, especially with that Tyler Toffoli addition, which I am still mad he chose the Sharks over the Canucks. But that is besides the point. I think Eklund and Celebrini are going to take steps to show how good they are. Of course, Celebrini, first overall pick, I think is going to be great. We'll see about Will Smith. I'm not sure what to think about him. I think he's going to be good one day, but out of the gate, I'm not so sure. And then to go along with that, Michael Granlund and Zetterlund on the top 6 is bad. But that bottom 6 has some nice role players who will be able to sort of teach the young guys how to play. I really like the addition of Barclay Goodrow. However, he doesn't, so I don't know how well it is going to work out there. Their defense got better over the offseason. Still has a lot of work to do. Obviously, still having Marc-Edouard Vlasic on your team is bad. He is sort of a cap anchor, and he will not be gone until he retires. I really like the addition of Jake Wallman. I can't believe that they gave up nothing for him. And then in that Blackwood and Askarov, I think Askarov is going to have really good stats this season. I don't know how many wins he's going to put up behind this sort of pretty bad team. But like I said, he's going to really speed up this San Jose rebuild. And then Blackwood is fine. He's whatever. He will become a backup by the end of the season. Calgary is up next, second and last in the Pacific. I think Calgary has finally decided that it is time to start a proper rebuild. However, they are still sort of handicapped by the certain players on their team, Jonathan Huberdeau and Mikael Backlund. Blake Coleman sort of anchor that down. I like the addition of Mantha. He'll be a trade chip towards the deadline. I really like their young core. It's not quite there yet. That's why they're rebuilding. But I really like Connor Zary and Martin Pospill. I like them as sort of prospects that will develop this season into true NHL talent. And then on the back end is probably the weakest depth, the strongest, weakest depth I've ever seen. They have some really interesting pieces on the back end. I just don't know, first of all, who will get ice time for them and sort of who will be able to be good enough defensively to sort of improve. But we'll sort of see. They're all sort of young, and we'll see how they go. Speaking of young, Dustin Wolf finally gets his chance in the NHL limelight, along with Dan Vladar and net. We'll sort of see how that goes. I don't know if Wolf will be that good this year. I sort of think, again, this is going to be a transition year for Calgary. So I think Wolf will look good, but I don't know if his stats will sort of tell the whole story. Anaheim, I have sort of surprising people being, like around an 80-point team. I really like some of the additions they did. Obviously, they're still in a rebuild and need to get rid of John Gibson. But yeah, I really like the Robbie Fabry addition. He adds a nice piece to the bottom 6 that was sort of lacking. Hopefully, Zegras can sort of come back and be that elite player he was a few years ago. I just like the sort of makeup of their team. They have a lot of good veterans to sort of teach these rookies as Anaheim sort of gets into the next stage of their rebuild, which is now looking really good with their defense. Zellweger and Minchkov, I think, are going to be really good, and they have some nice pieces back there to guide them into becoming true NHL players. Like I said, I think they need to get rid of John Gibson. It's clear, to me at least, that he doesn't really want to be there. His style of play doesn't really fit with the Ducks, and I think Dostal is going to take his spot one day. I really like what I see in Lucas Dostal. LA, I have missing the playoffs up next. I think LA are kind of frauds, and I think that they only made the playoffs the last few seasons just on the fact that the Pacific has kind of been bad. I really like Byfield for the Kings, and I think this season we're going to see him take a huge step up to become that true elite first-line center. But other than that, I don't like their offense. Kopitar's old. Kempe's good. I like Kempe. He's fine. Alex Lafreniere, not to be confused with the Rangers one, is not top 6 material. Fiala is sort of hitting the end of his peak. And then other than that, I mean, Danault is a fine face-off guy. He's not really what the Kings have paid him for. And then adding Tanner Jeannot adds that grit. So it's like whatever. What I'm most interested in for the Kings is Alex Turcotte, sort of see how he can continue to develop at the NHL level. I think their defense is really good, though. So hopefully that will make up sort of for the lackluster offense they have. It is a bit of a younger defense, so we'll have to see if they can take a good next step. And then in that, I think is a big question mark. I think Kuemper is very overhated. Don't get me wrong, he is not what he once used to be. Even with Colorado, I don't think he's that good anymore. And then David Riddick in net behind him. They're both fine. I think as long as they can be serviceable, I think the Kings have a chance to squeak into the playoffs, but I just don't think this team is good enough on paper. A team that I also don't think is good enough on paper, but I just think I think that there's something about them, is the Seattle Kraken. I mean, they made these big additions the offseason, Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Montour. I really like their offense. I think they could hopefully be an offensive powerhouse. Their defense again is good. I think they have some question marks in Larson and Alexiak, and then Evans and Borgen are sort of just filler pieces for now. So we're sort of see how that sort of meshes with what I assume will be a high-flying offense. I think Grubauer and Decord in that. I don't think Decord is going to have nearly as good as a season as he did last year. Decord's definitely more poised to be a backup goalie. And we'll sort of see how Grubauer is. He's sort of been up and down for the Kraken. So it's sort of how consistent can he be in that. Speaking of question marks in that, I have Vegas, Seattle making the playoffs. I don't know if I said that. Also Vegas making the playoffs. Vegas is an interesting team to me. I don't love their offense. Sort of interesting that they brought in Olofsson to play with Eichel. We'll sort of see if they can rekindle what they had in Buffalo. Olofsson at the end of his tenure there was pretty bad. I can't lie. He didn't do the one thing he was supposed to do, which is goal score. He doesn't play defense, so we'll sort of see how he fits in there. And we'll see about Alex Holtz. I thought he was going to be great for the Devils. He didn't really get a chance, but he wasn't also that good for them either. So we'll see how he fits in the Vegas system. Their defense is still really good. We'll see if Pietrangelo and Hanifin can sort of keep up their pace over the last few years. And, of course, in that is where I look to. I think Adin Hill is going to be carrying this team. I think Samsonov is terrible. He's good. Don't get me wrong. He's fine backup. But I don't think if Hill goes down or Hill can't take the workload, I think if they have to lean on Samsonov, they're going to have a rough time. Vancouver finishes second after winning the Pacific last year. I really like Vancouver. I think the additions that they brought in to replace their trade deadline acquisitions last year are going to be much better combined than Lindholm was for them last year. DeBrusk and Sprong specifically, I think, are going to be great pieces to have. Probably they will be alongside Pettersson, which I think will help him tremendously, especially in the postseason. He struggled last year not having anyone to pass to or having anyone to pass to him. On the defense, I am worried. I do like the addition of Forbort and Desharnais. I mean, Forbort is sort of that physical defenseman. He's sort of like a Mike Matheson light. He's not quite as dirty, but he's not my favorite. We'll say that. And then Desharnais is fine. I wish we got someone a little better, but he will work fine, sort of filling in there on the bottom pairing. And then I'm worried about the goaltending, especially if Demko isn't ready. I do trust Seelovs, however you pronounce it. But the third goalie, Patari, I think is how you say his name, is not someone I would want to trust as my backup for a long stretch of time. Speaking of a team with a goalie I wouldn't want to trust as my backup is the Oilers. I think they win the President's Trophy and the Pacific Division and the West in points. I mean, it's the Oilers. They have McDavid and Draisaitl. They're going to be good. The addition of Skinner and Arvidsson is going to be great. I think Skinner could probably put up 50. And, they have a solid defense. Evan Bouchard is great. I think he's going to take another step this year. And, yeah, but besides that, in that, I do worry about Skinner and Picard in that. But other than that, I think the team's good enough to give them the support they need, both offensively and defensively, to sort of thrive in that position. So, in the West, for our playoff matchups will be Pacific 1, Edmonton versus Wildcard 2, St. Louis. Pacific 2, Pacific 2, Vancouver versus 3, Vegas. Central 1, Dallas versus Wildcard 1, Seattle. And Central 2, Nashville versus Colorado, number 3. So a quick little run through here. I am running a bit low on time. We will do the West first. So I have Edmonton sweeping St. Louis. Even though I am high on St. Louis, I think if they have to play Edmonton, especially in a first round series, they are going to have an awful time. Vancouver and Vegas meet up again. Excuse me, for the 2020 bubble rematch. And I think Vancouver gets their revenge here again in 6 games this time. Dallas will be upset by Seattle. I am really high on Dallas, but I wanted an upset, and I feel like Seattle's sort of the team that could do that, especially if they have all their pieces chugging along at a high level. And then Nashville, Colorado, another upset. Like I said, I don't think Nashville is a good team. I just think they're going to have a great regular season, just sort of based on coaching and sort of just the unknowns surrounding them when you go up to play them. So I have Colorado in 5 there. And then Edmonton and Vancouver, again, meet up in the second round for the second year in a row. This time, a healthy Vancouver will take down Edmonton, as they would have last year if they were healthy, in 6 games. And Colorado, Seattle in the second round. I have Colorado in 6, which means Vancouver, Colorado in the Western Conference Finals, and I have Vancouver in 7. Who will they face? Let's find out. In the East, New Jersey, Tampa Bay. I have New Jersey in 7. I think Tampa Bay will give one last grand effort in the playoffs this year, and as they head into next season, the season after this, they will begin their downfall. Carolina and the Rangers. I think the Rangers are going to take care of Carolina. I think Carolina, again, is sort of like Nashville in the sense that they have a really interesting offense that will probably have a really good firepower, but I just don't think they'll have it when it comes to the playoffs. Florida versus Buffalo. I think Buffalo gets swept by Florida. Florida is a infinitely better team than the Sabres are, and like I said, I don't know if I really believe that the Sabres are there, but I just wanted to put them there because they do have the potential, but it would be like they were never even there, not winning a game. Boston-Toronto doesn't go 7 this time. I think Boston wins in 6. Like I said, I don't think Wall is ready for the responsibility, and it's Toronto. Of course they're going to choke. So moving on to the second round for the East, we have the Rangers and the Devils. I have the Rangers in 7. I think the Devils are just not ready to quite take a step towards the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Rangers have done it in the past, have proven in the past few years that they can, and that I think Shesterkin will be playing out of his mind this playoffs. And then Boston and Florida taking on in the other series. I have Boston in 7, just barely getting rid of the defending champions. I don't like to pick back-to-back champions or back-to-back finalists for that matter. So I think this is the place for Florida to go out, and I think Boston is a really good team. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people just how good they are. And speaking of surprising people, just how good they are in the Eastern Conference Finals, I have them winning in 7 over the New York Rangers to face Vancouver. So we have a 2011 rematch. And I think in 6 games, the Vancouver Canucks will defeat the Boston Bruins at home, in their barn, in the Bruins barn, as JT Miller lifts the Conn Smythe Trophy before Quinn Hughes lifts the cup for the Canucks' first Stanley Cup in franchise history. I don't know. I've had this feeling that it's going to be Vancouver-Boston the whole offseason. I think that's going to be the finals. So that means that they will both lose in round 1 in an embarrassing fashion because I am terrible at picking potential playoffs. I picked Colorado as my champion for 4 straight years, and then the year I didn't pick them to win, they actually won it. So we'll see how it goes this season. That was the first episode of the Top Left Corner podcast. It's been great talking to you here, and I hope you tune in next week for probably a shorter episode this time, but this was sort of an introduction and my entire season predictions. Went a little more in depth than I thought, and I hope you liked my insight. But that has been all. I'm Finn Lyons. Thank you.